Holy plagiarism, Tankabuto. How come I've never been here before? Because we've never traveled together. It's always been me warping either you or Galaxy Blade, and I get it. I have yellow hair, but that doesn't mean I'm a taxi. So, where to? Well, that reminds me. Galaxy Blade, you ever make Geeks good? Is Geeks good yet? What's that? I want to say no. You're right. You know, Toku lately really feels like it's either been hit or miss. We've either had some good ones or some bad ones, but overall, over the last few years, it's only been a handful of shows to really choose from. And that's not diverse enough as other mediums. That's it. Take me to when Toku was peak! Alright, here we go! Get away! Get away! That ain't it! That ain't it! Look, just take me to whenever there was more than just the big three dominating the airwaves. Oh! The 1970s!
私は地球の兄弟星エメラルド星から来たものだ。
That's great and all, but why do you look like an Ultraman ripoff?
溶けてふしゃー
Ah, what the hell is this? Oh god, is that a knife? Now where am I? Hello there. What? And what's that for? Now where am I? Oh my god! Oh my god! Beat his ass! Beat that ass! Yeah, I want nothing to do with this. Beat me up! Listen, I'm not nearly intoxicated enough for the 1970s era of Toku explosions. How about we go a little bit more recent? The 2000s! You call that recent? Not in this fandom.
Future's now, old man.
Just do the thing. Tokusatsu, although fundamentally a medium, gets treated like a genre, and it's very easy to see why. It goes through phases and wanes between popularity to obscurity, especially in different regions. Though it's been almost 80 years since what would come to be known as modern tokusatsu, the boom of the genre arguably started in the late 1960s, and that carried through to the large explosion in the 1970s. It then simmered into a few key franchises with some outliers in the 80s until the 90s came, and dropped a lot of that medium into only a few stragglers. But then, something happened. No, not that. Not that. That. The return of Kamen Rider to the airwaves brought along with it a revitalization of not just interest in the genre because of Pretty Boy Joe Odagiri, but also toy sales. See, while Sentai had been going on into its simmer, clutching onto relevancy due to its Western counterpart, Kamen Rider was that kid that tried to be edgy in high school, but peaked in 11th grade, came back home after 4 years in college, and has grown into a man with gains, showing that the market could actually handle multiple shows and that what's old is new again. It wasn't long before other networks, studios, and creatives wanted to tackle the medium once more, especially since the technology had come a long way since the last big boom. Starting things off, Toho partnered with Konami to bring us the Choseishin series. Starting in 2003 with Grand Caesar, this spin on Sentai's formula was a unique one at the time, as the cast is based off of constellations we have 12 characters to work with. The funny thing is that even though you think that that would be a lot of characters to juggle, they actually do it pretty well with it. The dynamic of 4 separate teams of 3 with their own sense of style, flavor, and contrasting of ideals leads to a great dynamic. Of course, this being Toho, known for Godzilla, their monster designs were pretty damn good, and the mecha feels very unique in their own way. This show in general has 3 arcs, the first and last feeling more serialized, while the one in the middle hits its own episodic nature. This series was then followed by Genseiken Justy Risers in 2004. After 12 protagonists, we tone it down a bit with 3. In my opinion, this show took a lot of what made the series before it good and refined it to a much better degree. The backstory and lore on the show revolves around your standard good versus evil, with evil being banished. But look, this is a series I found enjoyable since it had a condensed cast, so there was ample growth between them all. The costume design was also a step up from Grand Caesar, even if the Henshin device was ass. This show continues down the path of a lot of Heisei 1 Kamen Riders, where it felt like a drama with your Henshin heroes thrown in. So, if you like that flavor, then I highly recommend Justy Risers. Also, side note, although a different series, this and Grand Caesars do take place within the same world. And that's it for the Chosation series. You sure? Oh, I'm sure. Positive. Yes. Yes, Caesar X was a thing that happened right after Justy Risers finished airing. And in all honesty, this was actually the first one that I watched from this series, being the one that was actively being subbed when I got into it back in 2005. The franchise was actually cancelled with this one, having it only last 38 episodes. This season is a complete 180 from the other 2 in this franchise, as it tries being more comedic, lighthearted, and not just from the main cast, but also its villains. You can feel the demographic shift in complete tone. I personally don't recommend this one, as it soured the franchise for me for years, until I was talked into giving it another shot. But hey, if you want to see Aang from O's before O's and Kyoryu Cyan but from the future, then go for it. Don't blame me afterwards. Dialing it back to 2003, let's take on a franchise that I believe everyone is familiar with, and that's Sailor Moon. That's right, the Mahou Shoujo series existed not just in manga and anime form, but also in tokusatsu. But I hear some of the complaints now. But listen, this show, although it borrows a lot from its source materials, it takes things in a different direction from the other sources it came from. So if you're coming into this thinking that you already know it all, don't. They definitely throw you in some curveballs in characters, plot points, and heel turns. If there's something I enjoy from shoujo anime and manga, is that it tends to be very character driven as opposed to your typical shonen style. That also translates great onto this one. I know some just can't get past the wigs, there's also a lot of twirling shots and some camera angles leaving you looking over your shoulder, but having recently rewatched this one for the 3rd time since it came out, it's a highly recommended from me. Now from magical girls to magical dragons, we've got Maran Senki Ryukendo. I have to admit that watching this one back when it was released, I noped out halfway through with the introduction of a certain edgy boy. But in my rewatch recently, its slapstick comedy mixed with great casting and good suit design makes this show a must-watch for those of you who are into any of that kind of thing. Produced by Takara Tami and aired in 2006, this show features traveling swordsman Kenji, who goes to a city just riddled with demons, just using their citizens to gather up minus energy in order to revive the big bad. However, in this show, Akibono City and its citizens are just as much part of the cast as the titular hero and his allies. All this while working from their own demon fighting and magic studying organization named SHOT. Although this show may be episodic, if I were to compare it to a more recent show, it would be Gone Brothers, in the same way that almost every episode can be watched without context of the previous ones and will still just be a ride. It's another one of my recommended shows from this era. Ryukendo also served as a launching platform for the Tomika Heroes franchise, which most might know Tomika from their current anime franchises. But it did start off as a tokusatsu back in 2008 with Rescue Force, and 2009's Rescue Fire. Now, these are two shows that I admit I have not watched as of yet, so I can't speak to them personally. However, I know they have their fans, and they are definitely on my watch list, especially with what I've seen of the mechs. And at first, I was a little bit concerned because they were CG, but they're very fluid, especially for the time this came out. And of course, there's those banger intros. The show in themselves gives me Go-Go 5 vibes, in their suit designs also competing with the fact that Jiku from the Go-Go 5 film looks very similar to how these guys ended up turning out. Alright, look, you're skirting too close to the 2010s, I'm gonna need you to wind that back. You're right! So here's another one that almost most of you probably know of and saw coming a mile away, and that is 2005's Garo. Originally a one-shot with a future uncertain, we now know this franchise to have stemmed multiple different shows, timelines, and even get animes set in their own continuities. But it all began here, with this being a toku set out to aim for the adult demographic, and I believe it aired during 1 AM in their time slot. And be advised that this one does have nudity. Now, if you aren't sold on the suit design alone, the whole aesthetics of the show are just so dark and stylized to the point that this show's gravest sin was being filmed in standard definition. Following Koga, the Ogonkishi Garo, and his never-ending duty to slay horrors, when a random artist named Kaoru gets caught in a fight and gets splashed with blood. But that happened to be horror blood, so now she's limited on lifespan, and what starts off as a usage of a horror allure turns into character growth. This show starts off in an episodic sense, but as it progresses, the narrative starts getting more and more fleshed out. The world in itself has its own lore that gets fleshed out later on in the series, and it's a good foundation for what this series sets up in the future. This run of the show ended after 25 episodes, but it got a TV special soon after that expands more on the Makai world and more of the lore established by the series. Now you at home have the luxury of just looking up this entire franchise and watching it all, but for those like myself who watched it way back when it aired, we had to wait 5 years before we got the next fully live action outing. Is that it? We're done? Not exactly, because there were other shows that also came out around that time, but although I watched them back in the day, a lot of them just feels meh. I'm talking of course about Shibuya 15, where, holy shit, is that Mari? I completely forgot that she was even in this show! Set in an isekai version of Shibuya, we join an amnesiac wondering just what the hell is going on. But they know they gotta escape. This version of the world is overseen by Peace, who sets the rules. Fail to comply, and you're reset with no memories of your past self intact. My biggest recollection of this is that Peace was played by the great Mark Musashi, who was also in Garo, and later on Cutie Honey. He was also a suit actor since his fighting is just that damn good. Then, also in this show, we get Emma, who is the transforming commodity of this programming, into something straight out of Xenosaga. We instantly get a connection between her and the lead Shota, setting up the events of the show. But it's only 12 episodes and roughly 6 hours of viewing time. But this show just screams mid-2000s edge, so if that's your thing, give it a shot. I personally am in no rush to see this one again. In 2007, we also got Keitai Sosukan 7, also known as Phone Braver 7, another show I watched back when it aired, but struggled to remember much about it either. I did want the toys though, but importing things back in 2007 was a hassle and a half. Getting footage for this show was also a hard time since not a lot of folks kept up with this. And I'm not about to read a wiki entry on it, so you'll just have to take a look at this toy and reach for your wallet. Around the same time, Toei was continuously experimental with a few one-shots that I found were both actually uploaded on YouTube and haven't been struck down yet. I guess they really don't care about these ones. And that's Show Ninja Tai Inazuma and Inazuma Spark, which sees several of the cast members from Deca Ranger and Maji Ranger as TV show producer June, played by Deca Pink's actress, goes back in time in order to produce a new entry in a fictional toku franchise using real people of the Edo period. The only problem is that once they actually get there, they realize that there's actual monsters during that time period. It continues on with its sequel, Spark, in which June is now producing a follow-up series with Nepo Baby Tsubame, who just can't cut it, but gets taken back in time to ignite that spark. Since these are almost hour-long specials in themselves, they're at least worth a glance. Just keep in mind that it's pretty gaggy. Wasn't there a Cutie Honey adaptation that released around that time? But the live came out in the 2010s. Not that one. You know the one. Yes, the Hideaki Anno film. You know, I actually haven't seen this one for some reason. Actually, there were a lot of folks during the time that just told me this was not that great of a film. Heard a lot of bad things. So, you know what? It's only an hour and a half.
2 hours later.
Well, that was certainly a Hideaki Anno film. And coming off of the Shin universe, you can see those vibes are here as well. If you're familiar with his style, he references to the source material while playing up his interpretation of what the original creator's vision was. Then, this should be no shocker to you. But if you know nothing of Cutie Honey and go blind with this one, then it's definitely gonna be a shocker to you. Based off of Go Nagai's original magical girl, Cutie Honey, Go Nagai, also known for great hits such as Mazinger Z, this follows Kisaragi Honey, who is a robot girl that was made by her father that was then murdered by the evil organization known as Panther Claw. Though Honey falls into the ecchi category of things where there's a lot of provocative shots, angles, and clothing, and some might be turned off by the exaggerated way the characters act, it's not far off from the acting scene in the other live-action interpretation years later. It hits the right comedic tones, has those serious moments, and some moments like this. But I recommend this one as well if you're into any of the previously mentioned things. Overall, the 2000s were an interesting era for tokusatsu as a medium. There were various options to choose from outside of your Sentai, Kamen Riders, Ultraman, and Godzillas. And there were a few others that I probably ended up missing from this list. I'm working off of my own knowledge base here, and working through some member berries as well. But in all honesty, if you're a bit burned out on the mundane and formulaic approach that some of these shows recently have been going in, or just have fatigue on any of the major franchises, but you don't want to go as far back as the 70s and 80s because of the effects used then could be a turnoff and your mileage may vary, then I would say that this era is a pretty good middle ground for you if you want to experience some other shows. Now, for those of you that have seen any or all of these shows, which would you say is your favorite and which one would you highly recommend over the others? And for those of you that haven't seen any of these shows, or just some, but not all, I tried avoiding spoilers and going in too deep on any of these as I want you all interested to go out and experience them yourself, without my full interpretation to fully sway you. Your opinions are your own, and mine are mine. Anything to add, Time Kabuto? Pre-orders for the Fi's next CSM appear to have gone back up. Alright, so where to next? Wherever the Tokuverse takes us. Well, that's it from us. Until next time, bye.